One of the greatest fears of a mother is that everybody's going on with life and you just hope that your daughter will not be forgotten.
It's burned right into your soul and into your heart and your mind.
I'm journalist Angela Kennecke. I lost my oldest child, Emily, to fentanyl poisoning in 2018. Emily was just 21. Her death was preceded by years of struggle, the struggle of addiction so many families face today. We were just 3 days away from holding an intervention when she died. We couldn't save her.
There's a term called amelioration of grief, and it means that grief takes time, and it will get better only if you put work into it.
In this podcast, I'm grieving out loud with other parents who've lost children and with those currently struggling with the monster of addiction.
I didn't want to go into withdrawal. It was like one of the biggest fears of my life at the time.
You were terrified of withdrawal?
Terrified.
Why?
It is the worst pain, illness, the worst feeling that I could ever imagine having.
I'm also learning from experts in the field on how we can and must do better to treat this disease of the brain.
We treat the addiction and the effect of the addiction, but we're not looking at the pain. The root cause.
Well, today I am joined by Kerry Peluso, who is a grieving mother, just like me. She lost her 30-year-old daughter, Sam, in 2018, in October of 2018. After years of really struggling with addiction, but Sam had accomplished so many amazing things during that time while she struggled with the disease. And Kerry joins me from Tallahassee, Florida, to talk about Sam and to talk about what she's been through, what her family's been through, and the grief that she continues to feel. So thank you, Kerry, so much. First of all, I want to thank you for reaching out to me and contacting me and telling me Sam's story.
I think it's something that we all need to share these stories more so that people start to understand that the people who suffer from addiction aren't what people picture sometimes as homeless people under the bridge. And, I even had someone very close to me yesterday say, well, Sam stood out because she was so different from other addicts. And it was someone really close to me. And I said, no, that's not true. I said, there's police, surgeons, teachers like Sam, other people. There's a lot of people who you don't think. And I says, the problem is there's such a stigma associated with it that people don't often turn for help or come out because they don't want to be viewed as they're that type of person.
Exactly. After I've spoken to big groups, I've had nurses come up to me. I've had sheriff's deputies come up to me, people from all walks of life, and say, I struggled with the same addiction, maybe after a surgery or something. However they fell into it, they fell into it. I think what strikes people, or why Emily's story has gotten a lot of attention, is because of how beautiful Emily was. She was a beautiful girl who people think beautiful people should have everything figured out and going for them, right? And I would say Samantha is equally, or Sam, as you called her, was equally as beautiful. I mean, just a gorgeous, gorgeous girl. And people think that can't happen to somebody who's beautiful.
Yeah, she was beautiful. She had a master's degree. She was smart. She had so much given to her, she'd even gotten through recovery when she left. She'd went on first on Subutex and then later had 13 months clean, but she was drinking alcohol. And I think that probably was a problem. But when she left us, she was just she was at a really hard point. So she's not part of the 185-day statistic. She's part of this other statistic, suicide, which I believe that there's a lot of crossover. And I think that her past had a lot to do with it. And even in the note she left, and before she had met her husband, she looked for different type of men because she said, who's going to want me? I'm a drug addict. So even though she was clean at that point, she's like, who is going to want me? So
I do think you're right. There's so much stigma and shame that goes along with this, as well as suicide and addiction are so tied into each other. I mean, a lot of times when people overdose, it is suicide, or, just different ways that people are trying to cope with their addiction can lead to suicide. So there's definitely a tie between the two. Can you start at the beginning and tell us Sam's story? I mean, what kind of kid was she, and what happened? When did she start having troubles with substance use disorder?
So she was very easy as a preschooler. Actually, the other women in my neighborhood, the other mothers said, you don't even, because she was my first child, you don't know what it's like to really deal with motherhood because you have Sam. She was just a happy, pleasant little person. And at 5, when she was 5, my son was born, and he was very active and got into everything. And so, but she always just did what she was supposed to. She did Pop Warner competitive cheerleading, softball. She was in, I can't count the amount of 4-H clubs, the alpaca club, the dog training club, the baking club, the speech club, everything she was in. We were driving her all over. She was just happy. She tried different instruments. She just was very active. And then when she reached 9th grade, she got all very emotional, and all of a sudden she didn't want to do anything. She stopped 4-H. She had tried out for the high school cheerleading at the end of 8th grade when they do it. She didn't make it. And then she just was very unhappy all of a sudden. It was just a big change. So we started worrying about her. Eventually we found out that she was doing some cutting, which we had no idea what cutting was before then. So we took her to counselors. The counselor, she never would talk to any of the counselors. So we worked with her close, and she didn't get it. Her grades had went down a bit, but they weren't horrible. And then in 11th grade, I took her out to visit art schools for colleges. And that gave her kind of like, oh, well, this is why I need to do well in school so I can get to go to one of these places. So she started doing well in school. She was even when we had talked about antidepressants, she was very against any type of drug. She always was. So she went off to college, and she was fine. She had a boyfriend. She always did look for people who kind of were hurt, and she wanted to fix them or help them or whatever. And so she had a boyfriend who had a very difficult background at the beginning of college. And then we had moved to Georgia, and she switched to a college in Georgia because we had lived in New Jersey. She grew up in New Jersey. And in Georgia, she went to college there. She was majoring in fine arts. And she had during college, she met her boyfriend, and he was in recovery. He was a heroin addict. And she went out with him the first couple of years. Everything went right. He was in recovery, and I think it was, as far as I know, things looked like they were fine. But then he had went off. Later, when she told us what happened, is he had used again, and she was just very upset and angry with him. And then she had gotten out of college, graduated, and she didn't have a job. She was doing a clerical job, which was similar to the job she did during the summers. So she was very frustrated because now she had her college degree and she worked all this way and she couldn't find a job. So she was discouraged about a lot of things. And then so he offered her to try it. And she thought she could try it because she's much stronger than him, and she's strong, and she was a very strong, very determined woman. So she said she was stronger, so she could try it. At this point, she was in her early 20s, probably 22 then, 21, and she tried it. She was wrong. So she wasn't as strong as she thought.
I don't think anybody is that strong. I think the drug is strong.
Right.
I think the drug gets a hold of you or does something in your brain. And you can become addicted after the first use or first couple of uses, especially. So a couple of things I don't mean to interrupt you. I want you to continue your story, but a couple of things I wanted to tell you I thought were very, very parallel to Emily's story. First of all, when Emily was younger in elementary school and middle school, and even up into high school, although our problems did start freshman year as well, freshman into sophomore year. She wanted to do everything, experience everything. If she wanted to play this instrument and that instrument, and she wanted to do this sport and that sport. And I do think there's something in the personality of someone who they sort of become obsessed, right, with whatever it is they're doing. They're just, and then they become obsessed with the drug eventually. And another parallel is the time frame. And Emily didn't want to go to the counselors either. Like, she did a complete shift in her personality, 9th to 10th grade. Like, it was unbelievable. Yeah. We couldn't understand what was happening. I drug her to counselor after counselor. The doctor prescribed antidepressants. She flushed them down the toilet. So, you're trying to help your kid. And I feel like we've been on a similar journey. Like, didn't you feel like you were desperately trying to help your kid? And my daughter, we looked at art schools too. And she picked a school to go to for art and got an art scholarship. And how eerie is it that our stories are so parallel?
Yeah, it's something, because she wanted the art, but she'd try anything. And then we just never knew. We were kind of totally at a loss when she started having these problems in 9th and 10th grade. And we were just both, myself, my husband, I've never seen him so upset, because it's just like, until then our life seemed like all nice. We went on cruises, we went to family camps, and we did all these nice things. And we just thought you work hard. We had bought an old house and fixed it. She liked horses. She'd even had a horse, and she went out and mucked the stalls. And so we thought we were, you think you're doing things right or something,
Right. Oh, exactly.
And exactly. Then we were like, what is happening?
I know. And so the other parallel was for Emily. It was also a boyfriend. So her junior year, I think it was, she started dating a boy that was a year older than her. And he had already been in trouble for dealing. And she stayed with him until just a few weeks before her death. And really, the boyfriend is most likely a heavy user. And so I have a question for you about that, about the boyfriend element. Have you found it? I have found it very hard, because I did try to get my daughter to move away from this boy, especially early on, especially when she was still under my roof. And he was disrespectful to me. And I said, a boy that will disrespect your mom will disrespect you. And he did. There was some abuse in their relationship. I have a hard time dealing with that, because, you always hear, oh, we're supposed to forgive. We're supposed to forgive and forgive and forgive. And I'm a Christian person, and I do feel there is healing and forgiveness, not for the person who did wrong, but for yourself. Although I really struggle, this guy doesn't want forgiveness. I mean, he can't stand me. I'm the enemy, but I do see like this she thought she was in love, and all those emotions that a young woman feels when they're in love. And then this boy is there and offering them things, and they're using themselves, and this is what they do to please the boy. I have a lot of trouble with that now. I think about it a lot, and I really struggle. How do you feel about that?
So I think it's hard. I hadn't seen that boyfriend. So what had happened is she was still going out with him. We didn't know about the drugs yet. And she just him and her had come to our house to visit us. And I could see she looked very discouraged and upset. And she talked about wanting to be a teacher. So you never know as a mother, because you don't know if, and especially her, I might have texted her and she might have said, no, why would I want to do that? But anyhow, I just said, Sam, if you did want to go to college, I texted her, we would help you if you want to go to graduate school, because she'd already talked a little about that. And like 30 seconds later, yes, I'd like to do that. So then she went and arranged everything. She didn't tell him she was breaking up with him, but she told him that she found him an apartment. She found herself where the school, she applied to colleges, to graduate programs. She got in one 2 hours away. She wanted to be hours away. So she set herself all up, and she went 2 hours away. She started going to NA. She told her brother about the heroin. So it put her brother in a hard spot, and he came and told us. And so then again, we were completely shocked. At that point, we lived in Georgia. I worked at Emory University. So the chair of psychiatry there, he kind of helped me give an advice, because I called him, first thing you want to do is run there. And he's like, no, don't do that. You need to. So we told her we were coming on the weekend, and we did tell her that, we could see things are wrong. And so she admitted to us, but she showed us she had her 1 month button from NA, and she was going to NA, and she was settled in school. So it seemed like that was better. And we said, if you wanted to go to a rehab, so that seemed fine. But then she decided, okay, in the end, she decided to drop out of school and take some time she needed, because obviously withdrawals, got lots of symptoms with it. So, in the end, she went and was hanging out with him again. And I just told her, Sam, whenever you want, now she lives away from me. I said, when you want, I sent her information about Hazelden. There's one in Florida. And eventually she contacted me. It took like 2 months. She didn't want to talk to me at first, but then she said, I want to go. So we took her there. She was there for a week, and she really convinced me that this isn't for me. I need to do it on my own. I'm strong enough to do it on my own. Not everyone is. And I believed her or whatever. I don't know. I came down and I spent the next week with her in Florida. We did things, and she came home, and I do think she gave it a big, strong throw, but I do know that she was off again. And so we talked about outpatient programs. We got her hooked with some counselors. She never found anyone that she connected right. But anyhow, she went back to school. She ended up getting her master's in teaching. Then she came back. She had a teaching job. That guy came back into her life. In the end, we got a call. We didn't think she had any connection with him. And she called us, and he had actually gotten a fight. He'd never done it before. And there was things, he was very good at being manipulative, as some people will say sometimes, can occur. But there was a lot of things. I mean, he was part of our family by this time. At this point, we hadn't seen him in a couple of years. But before then, it was 6 years he'd been a part of our family. So it was very hard, because at some point it was someone who I accepted as part of our family. And then after you found out that he gave her this, and he knew how hard it was to be an addict, and he exposed her, it's just complete anger. So then she said he was mad at her because she wouldn't bring him back into our family. And she said, my parents aren't going to accept this, and I don't want you there. She didn't want to be with him. What had happened is I got an opportunity to go for work. I was going to present in Italy, which was Sam's dream, to go to Italy because she's art and studied art. So I guess then she just said, that's it. So she told him she wanted completely nothing to do with him. And he beat her up a bit, and she had called the police. The police came, took him away. She came and stayed at our house, and then she was very afraid of him coming back after her. So we went to Italy, one of the most valuable weeks of my life. She was fine and wonderful there, and she just would tear up like when she saw like paintings that she'd learned about in school. We were in Florence and Rome, and that always will be one of my most priceless possessions is that time. So we came back, and she stayed with us, and then she was very upset. Of course, we talked a lot about things, and she felt like, who's going to want me? But she still, she would go out on some dates on Tinder, and then she went out on one, and she met the person who's her husband, and she ended up marrying him. She bought a house. I mean, the interesting thing about her is she had this history of heroin addiction, but she still had great credit. She'd saved a little money to buy a house.
But I think that's the way you raised them. I mean, Emily was that way too. Like, she was still paying on her car up until the very end. And I didn't know about the heroin. We were playing an intervention, as I'm sure you know. I thought it was pills and marijuana. I guess that's how stupid I am. And when I heard about the heroin, I mean, I'm sure you felt the same way, like that kind of like horror and shock. And I had a cousin who suffered from heroin addiction in the 90s, who actually lived in LA, and her husband died from a heroin overdose. And Emily knew about that. We had talked about that. All these things that you think you're doing, like you said, all these things you think you're doing as a parent to protect your child or to inoculate your child from, this type of life. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at some point. And so did you ever hold any animosity toward that first boyfriend, or have you forgiven him?
I can't, I think about that a lot myself. I wrote a horrible letter to, after Sam, about a month after, I wrote him a horrible message on Facebook that he blocked me, that he was responsible, and if she would be here if she hadn't met him. And I even wrote, which was horrible, to his mother. I wrote, because she worked for a law firm and used to get him out of the hospital. And in the end, Sam had a gun because he had beat her up, and she arranged to get him out of jail, off on everything. So he was walking around free. So she had bought that because she was afraid he was going to come there. So I do believe that she had other things, and she wrote the letter, and she wrote a letter that she left us that we were the best parents that anyone could have, and there was nothing we could have done different. And she said, I don't want you to sit and think about what you could done different. I know you'll do that, Mom, but please don't. And blah, blah, blah. And she kills her that she's hurting us. And she had no idea how much it hurts, but
she didn't know. Yeah.
But I do think if she had never met him in high school, I mean, not in high school, in college, when she was in college, if she had never met him, things would have been much different. And it's just,
that's how I think
if
too.
there's one blessing, I think, the whole thing with the fentanyl and all that situation didn't come until Sam was older. So we got to keep her longer, because the whole fentanyl thing is just increased things. And I do feel blessed, and you have to also find, like, I'm trying to find out, forgiveness, it helps. And it's, that night she'd had a fight with her husband. If her husband had went home, it's not his fault. But if he didn't go home, and so it's like, and then why didn't I go there sooner? Why didn't I know? It's right. You play all these things in your mind.
You second guess everything.
Right. Why, how we could have stopped this. But, that one boyfriend who, I do think that's really where because she was just very, very ashamed. And she didn't share this, the stigma. She didn't share it with anyone. She followed, we both did the Anonymous People, which was a group that originally started to reduce the stigma. And they had done a movie that came out. And Sam had went on Facebook and she wrote about that it almost killed her. And she took it down like a minute later. And she's just like, I can't put it out there because, in Georgia, she's applying for teaching jobs in small towns. And she's like, I won't be able to get a job. And teachers, what people don't know, have to get their contract renewed every single year. So even if you got a job and you had the job, they may not renew your contract for no reason at all. They don't have to give you a reason for not renewing your contract. So
that's why in her name, I think it's so important you are speaking out, to end the stigma so that people can see this not as a character flaw, the addiction, not as a character flaw, but as the disease of the brain that it is. And you and I know that, and we've just got to convince all of us mothers have to convince the rest of the world that this is the truth, that it's not we didn't make a parenting mistake. It's not a character flaw. These aren't bad people. In fact, as I've said over and over again, these are some of the most sensitive and amazing people who've ever walked this planet who fall into the disease of addiction. And it is an acquired disease because they have to make the choice to use, but it is yet a disease of the brain. And so I feel bad that she had to feel all that shame and stigma. And I know my daughter felt the shame. She had written a poem in her journal about shame that was very heartbreaking. And I think every addict and every parent, every family, I mean, nobody wants this to happen in their families, and everybody thinks they can somehow prevent it, right? They think by actions or by what they do. So back to that, we didn't really end that forgiveness issue, but I would say that I'm still working on it. Are you still working on it with the first boyfriend? I don't know if I'll ever get there, but maybe it just takes time.
Yeah. There's a couple people on my list, so I'm trying to work through, I don't know, it's something that I have to work on still because I haven't forgiven him. And it's a part of me that feels like I'm betraying her if I forgive him.
Yes.
Other people in my family are angry, and because you go through so much, because it's not just me being hurt. I had to watch now my son, he has to live without a sibling, and he's living with horrible pain. And his wife, he just got married. They had the wedding without her. His wife was best friends with my daughter. So I had to watch them, who I love dearly, go through so much pain. I have to watch my husband. I saw him cry 3 times before. We've been married 34 years. I couldn't even count the times I've seen him cry, and it's just because it's just so tremendous. And, and Sam was actually at where she had a special certification on mental health, adolescent mental health. And she led the mental health awareness and suicide prevention programs at the 2 schools she worked at. And she even at her funeral we asked if there was anyone who wanted to get up and speak, and a student got up and spoke, and she said, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Sam. She saved me because she was going to take her own life. And so she was very connected, because art, she loved her art club. And I am so happy I got to see her do that. She loved teaching. She had such a passion, and she felt, because she had been an art student in high school, felt a little like, a step away. Everyone didn't get her, and she didn't always love high school. She felt she was better able to connect with the students, and I'm glad she got to that time. So.
Yes. So you have to be grateful for what she was able to do and the experience.
Yeah.
Like I think you had 9 more years, with your daughter than I had with mine. I don't know you always think of what could have been, what might have happened.
Right.
It's hard not to get stuck in those thoughts. What has helped you the most? I know, because we talked about this, if I would have done this, if somebody would have done that, if this could have happened.
Right.
And we all do that. We all do that because we want to deny the reality of what is, right? We want to be able to go back and change a past, and nobody can do that. The past is the past.
Right.
You can't change anything, and you have to accept what is. How do you do that?
In the beginning, the pain is so excruciating. You wonder, could it ever stop hurting? It's so horrible.
Yeah.
And we sat at home for the first couple of weeks, and it was just horrible. Everything was a trigger and reminded us. So I went back to work. So then work actually helped me in a way, because I had to go back there, and it kept my mind busy. Did jigsaw puzzles at home sometimes when I just felt like I can't take it, because I couldn't even drink, because if I drank alcohol, it's
worse.
The depression. It made the depression worse. Yeah, it was like I let all the demons in if I drank alcohol.
It is a depressant, and even if I can kind of do 1 glass of wine, but if I do 2 glasses of wine, I'm right back there at that sadness and depression. You're right. So what I found, and tell me if you agree with me, is that there is no fix. There's no fix. There's no thing you can do, pill you can take. There's nothing you can do. It will always come back. This grief, right?
Right. You're kind of just stumbling around and hoping on time. I do think that trying to feel more grateful does help me. Grateful that she had the time and she did those things. But it's hard, because you look at the past and you see all of a sudden these pictures that meant so much to you make you feel sad because, she's not here. You think about the present, you're sad because she's not here. And you think about the future, there's always the empty chair. And on every holiday, I'm never going to meet my grandchildren that I should have met. So you just go around and around. But I've also learned that I've got to kind of, try to stay focused on some of the good things in life and find things to, because at first you don't feel like you could ever feel joy or hope again, or look forward to anything. And
I really agree with you on exactly what you're saying. And I had a woman that I knew. She was an acquaintance, somebody who went to my church, didn't know her well, but she approached me after Emily died, and she said, I have something for you and I'd like to meet with you. And she had lost her daughter at 13. And this was years ago, her daughter would be in her 30s now. And she gave me this book, and it was a book that actually really helped me. The name of it is Grace Disguised, A Grace Disguised. And now I give that to everybody unfortunately I've known quite a few people since Emily has died who have had lost children, or just people that they love. Mm-hmm. But she told me, she said, life, you will find joy again. There is still beauty in the world, and life gets richer and deeper. And I couldn't believe her. When she said that to me, I wanted to believe her, but I was like, how in this anguish and pain that I'm feeling could that ever happen? But then within, I don't know, months to a year, or a little more than a year, you find yourself laughing at something again, and you almost are taken aback by it, because you're like, wow, I just laughed. And the truth is that I think you do maybe appreciate things some more, and you find joy in things, even simple things that maybe you overlooked before, because how fleeting this life is. How temporary things are. But while the pain still exists, and I don't want to downplay that. I don't want to say, you never get over it. You never move on. You may move forward, but it's ridiculous for society to think that we can move on. But tell me where you have found joy or happiness in your life.
I think my son's wedding, that was, I mean, there was I was worried because it would be sad. And even it was funny when they were taking the family state, they said, well, is there any siblings? We said no. And then the photographer asked again, no siblings? And we're all just like, no.
You don't want to have to explain to everybody, right?
Yeah. It's like, no, I mean, he could be an only child, but so we left it at that. But that was, although, it had its moments of sadness because my daughter's best friend from college was one of the maid of honors, and we've gotten very close to her. And it was, so everything. And then some of the people at the wedding, it was the first time I saw them. So, but in advance, I emailed everyone. This is about my son and his future wife's happiness. It's not about Sam, so we can put it aside. Because I also wanted people to feel comfortable because people don't know what to say to you. Sometimes, and they feel like they got to come up with something very wise to say, and sometimes it's not that wise. So it's, but
I don't think anyone can truly understand. I don't think anybody can truly understand unless you don't want anybody else to go through it. Like I just had a friend who's his son, and
you don't want them to.
Yeah, I'm devastated for him.
You can't imagine how excruciating the pain is. Until what did help me, I remember. About the second or third week, we had someone from one of the, there's a suicide survivors program here in Tallahassee. And I'd reached out and a woman came to visit me in my house and talked to me. And she talked about her daughter. And then we had lunch a couple times after. But I remember after she left, it felt like, I'd been like in such horrendous pain constantly. And after she left, it was like, it would like raised only for like 45 minutes. But I was like, oh my God, this is so great. I feel like almost normal. Like the sadness, I knew what happened in my mind, but it was just like, it's like a physical pain. And then I remember when I went to lunch with her one of the weeks after, I said to her, do you reach the point where you wake up and you're not like hit with like the horrible sadness? And she said, I said, is it the first thing you think of? And she said, no. And she's 6 years. She said, no, I get up now and I do things and I go on. And, she goes, she's always there and she's part of my life and I do things in alignment with it. But, it's not something that she gets up and feels. Because at that point I was still waking up and it was the first thing that hit me was Sam's gone. And, and it was always a fear of mine because we did know she was using drugs for the recent years. We didn't know she wasn't using them recently, but what she'd also, after she got married, she wanted to have a baby. So she went off Subutex because she had been clean for a long time then, but she didn't feel it was clean. So she went off that. She went through a horrible summer of withdrawals and everything. But then I think what she did is she started drinking a lot of alcohol. So after she was gone, her husband said she was drinking a lot of wine every night. So, and so it was kind of maybe a replacement or.
I do think addiction transfer, right? That's pretty easy for people suffering from substance use disorder to transfer their addiction, right? They go from one drug, and alcohol is, they're at risk for those things. And I don't know. Well, I'm so sorry that for everything that you have been through. What, you talked about, Sam starting this group about suicide prevention, mental health awareness with her kids. Like you had this student come up and say, that she saved her life. What do you think Sam's legacy is? She's an artist. What do you want it to be?
I've had many students also reach out to me from Facebook and tell me what an impact she had. And I even have friends from high school to tell them what an impact they had, that other people weren't nice to them and Sam was nice to them. And so many people have reached out. So I think her legacy is she did have a positive impact on so many lives. It also makes you sad on the other side, because what would if she was here for all the more years? But I think her legacy, we have all of her art, everything, but I do want to do things to reduce the stigma, because I think that's one she did. No one in my family knew about this, because we told Sam, we're very proud of you and everything, and you can tell it's up to you. We left it up to her, and I've questioned, was that right? Because maybe support from other parts of the family would have helped her. And now people, many of the family knows, and they've been supportive. And when they don't know, they may say things that, about addicts that doesn't help you or want you to tell us about it. But she, a couple months before she went, she had been visiting my mother, her grandmother, and she told her about it. So, because we left it up to Sam whether she wanted to tell. And so she had told her, and one of the things she told my mother is she would want someday to tell her story so that people could understand that even trying it once can have such severe consequences. And, so that was one of the things that she wanted. So I think about that part. And, that's what I try to think about. I mean, I struggle sometimes thinking, what can I do on behalf of Sam? Because I want to do something that so she goes on and she's remembered and she can continue to have an impact, because she was someone who wanted so badly to help other people. And she did. I mean, her students who had graduated high school, she still was in contact with them. Like many of them that came to her funeral were students who had graduated high school 3 years before, because she had been teaching for 4 or 5 years. So
nobody really knew, what was going on inside her mind, right? And that is part of the issue with suicide in general, is that it always surprises people. How could this person, this happen to this person? But if you piece the whole story together, you have better understanding. And I think that's why it's so important to tell their stories.
Man, it's hard because we were surprised. We knew she'd had struggles before, but now, and I knew in her marriage there was some issues and they had some arguments. So I knew that wasn't perfect, but she had a job that she loved, the principal, and she had coworkers, and she'd gotten up so many times. And I think that's what made it hard. Even like my son said afterwards, he says, it's just so upsetting because they say that God helps those who help themselves. And she helped herself. Like he said, just bad things happened to her for no reason. It's just like, it just seemed like things and no matter what happened, Sam got up, brushed herself off, went on and did things, whatever it was, and just did things. And it was just like, I saw one analogy said that sometimes it's like a cup that's full and then just one drop falls in. And then it runs over and it's suicide, because it was just like, it wasn't like a big thing. Things seemed like they were going in a good direction, and she'd been through so much worse times, but you just don't know. And a month before she passed, October 18, it was a month before in September, it was Suicide Awareness Month. So her and I had been talking about suicide because she was doing projects with her students. And we had a whole discussion, and I just didn't think that was something that it was, I thought for Sam, she'd gotten through all of her stuff and she was doing in a much better place now. And I was kind of also proud that I had raised someone who was so strong, and I'd given her the strength and the tools she needed. And, when she's gone, then it's like, okay, that was gone. And then you do feel like kind of like you failed as a parent, because I should be able to keep my daughter alive and happy. And that's just one of the other wonderful emotions that comes with this.
Oh, I know. As a mom, we take on so much, don't we? And I think people do choose their own paths, and has very little to do with you got to remember, our parenting only goes so far. Right? Once they hit those teenage years, peers also are a much greater influence on them. And then the whole society as a whole, is such a great influence on people. And I think I always say, as a mom of 4 kids, like if I take complete blame for my oldest daughter becoming addicted to substances and for how her story played out, well, then do I take all the credit for the kid I've got who's, getting straight A's and scholarships and has never touched any substance? You know what I mean? Like how can we either give credit or give blame to the parent when every kid is so different, and you do your best, and you do your best with what you know at the time. And I think we have to take that off of ourselves, that guilt and shame. We just have to let go of that, because it is not your fault. It is not your fault. As you said, she had everything. She had all opportunities. She had supportive parents. What else could you have done? And sometimes, like, I had tried tough love with Emily. I talk about that, and, that didn't work. And then I had always tried to approach her from a standpoint of love as she got older, and especially if she wasn't living in my house anymore. I would always, but I still had to have some boundaries. I wouldn't necessarily, so it's just a very hard road for us to walk. And I always try to think, while that aching for that physical presence of our children will always be there, but I do think we have to shed some of that. We have to let go of it. We just have to drop it, that burden that you carry.
doing better with that. And I just, sometimes when you say what helped me the most, and it sounds, I've heard people say this and it sounds like, oh gosh, how, and at times I've thought, well, how could it be? But gratefulness, I mean, I think about, and even close to the beginning, I thought about, what if I'd never had children? What if I'd never known Sam? What if she was only meant to be here for 30 years? Some say people come down to learn or whatever. I would never or not want to be her mother. I would never not have children because this could happen. And if she could only be here for 30 years, I would a billion times over choose to have been her mother with everything that happened. Because it was precious time. And I am so thankful that I had that time with her. I wanted more, obviously, but I'm thankful.
I feel the exact same way. In fact, shortly after she died, I thought, would I rather have not had those 21 years and last 7 years of real troubles and issues that, it was, I would say I didn't sleep for 7 years, but would I have rather not have had that? And then this immense pain following her death, would I have rather not have experienced that and never have known her, never have had her, not even, and I thought, no. I mean, she was an amazing person. And I know your Sam was an amazing person. And I am so grateful that I had her in my life. So even though that came with a tremendous amount of pain that you can't even verbalize, I can't even put into words, and I've said that before, and I'm sure you feel the same way, that pain, that experience is, you have to experience it. You cannot make someone understand through words.
Right. No.
Despite all that, I would do it again in a heartbeat just to know her.
Me too. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. Well, I just appreciate you sharing Sam's story with us and with all of our listeners. I do hope that people can come away from listening to this podcast with a better understanding of how addiction gets its hold onto people and why things are so difficult for people suffering from substance use disorder and the after effects. We are the aftershocks, right? Of this, it was like a huge bomb or tornado or train or whatever you want to liken it to. We're living in the after effects of that. And I think just the fact that you're talking to me is amazing, right? You could be curled up still, even, it's people think, you should get over it quickly or you should move on and move forward. But that never happens. And you could make different choices with your life. You wouldn't have to talk to me.
The main thing is I do want to go on and, my son still counts on me, and I'm probably going to be here. You never know, but maybe another 30 years. I got to go on and try to do, Sam wouldn't want me to feel miserable. And that's not what she would want, I know. So I've got to find a way for my husband, for myself, for my son to go on and to, certainly not always easy, but
no.
And a lot of it you're faking it. But people at work had said, oh, it looks like you're doing good now. You're over it. It's good. It kind of hits me odd, but it's like, all right, well, that's what I'm trying to portray here, that I'm competent and that I know what I'm doing. So, and they've corrected themselves. You're not over it, but
you're able to function. I think probably
Yeah, I function and I seem like I do everything that I should.
Some days are harder than others, for sure. And I think sometimes that thought of like, gosh, I've got 30 years without them. Man, that seems like a really long time, to feel the pain of the loss and of the loss of that physical connection. I used to think
about that a lot in the beginning.
Yeah.
30 years, why? It's like a life sentence. It's like,
right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. My heart is with you and your family. And I really appreciate you speaking to us today and sharing Sam's story.
With you. I think it's a great thing you're doing. So
it's what I can do. That's what I always say, with the skills and tools that I have and the platform that I have, it's what I can do. And I do what I can do. And part of it is for self-survival too. And I think it does help to know you're not alone. You're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Unfortunately,
We're a club that's got too many members.
Too many, especially with the drug epidemic. And that will lead me to maybe my final question here. We have all the attention on the pandemic and on COVID-19 right now, but this drug crisis has been brewing and building for years. And it is at a point where, we lose so many people every year, 60 to 70,000 people a year to overdose. And then if you would just, the ones we don't know about, the ones that don't count in that statistic, like Sam's.
Right.
addiction and the issues of shame and struggle and depression that lead to suicide. Addiction is often, many, many times a part of that component. So if we would just pay more attention to this issue as much as we have, and I think not that we don't need to be paying attention to the pandemic and what's happening. Of course we do. But we need to pay attention to this.
People a day. Over 300 people a day die from a drug overdose or suicide in the United States alone, not worldwide. So it comes down to, there is a big crisis. And I remember before the pandemic, they were like talking about people dying from vaping. And I said, it's horrible these 2 or 3 people died from vaping, but I'm hearing all this news about vaping. Why don't people, and my sister-in-law, we went on vacation in the fall, and I told her whatever it is, it's 328 or something, 320 something, people die from suicide and drug overdose, and she had no idea. She's someone who watches the news. She's just, it's not a statistic that people know, that there's that many per day. There's, because they all are living, and my extended family lives with the pain of losing Sam. And it's like every day there's another, if there's 320 some people, then multiply that by the 5 to 10 to 15 people per person that loved that person dearly, and now they're joining the club with all of us in our pain, just every day. And it's horrible. And you just wonder, why don't people know this statistic? Because it is a horrible crisis that every day there's more of us joining. And it's, and in a way I feel bad is most of our relatives had no idea that Sam had the problem for years, that she'd been, because we just all held it closely because of the stigma, and because she didn't want to share it. And we gave it to her as a choice, but she didn't want to share it, and we respected that. And no one knew it. They saw her, they didn't know. And
well, you and I are going to keep talking about it. So We're going to keep working on it. And you and I will be joined by thousands of other moms and dads and families. And together, I really believe we will make a change. Sometimes it seems like it's 1 step forward and 2 steps back, but we will. Right. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. For resources for families and how to get help, just go to Emily's Hope at paintingapathttorecovery.org. If you found this podcast helpful, please consider giving us a positive review. Thank you.